Hello, beautiful. I am so excited to introduce you to our guest today. She is a therapist, coach, and writer whose focus is in helping you heal from your emotionally immature parents and create healthy love after trauma. I am obsessed with her content and can't wait for you to hear our conversation today. Welcome, Morgan Pommells, to Your Body is Not the Problem podcast.
Thank you for having me.
To start, can you tell us a bit more about you, please, and your body image journey?
Oof, yeah. So, like you said, I'm a therapist and a coach. I exclusively specialize in treating the adult children of emotionally mature parents, particularly helping them free themselves from the role that their parents have casted them into, the identity their parents have casted them into. And as we will likely see in this episode, a lot of that has to do with food and body image. My own body image journey. Wow, what a question. I feel like I've been on every end of it. I'm biracial, and so I have like cultural and racial parts that are like kind of wrapped up in that. I also grew up in a tiny, tiny town, so there was like no representation of anybody who looked like me. I also grew up at the time of like, the early thousands, and like that was just a 90s, like that was a bad time. Well, it's been a bad time for body image, but that was a bad time for body image. So it is something I've had to really work on. It was something I really had to work on until I really did more of like the deeper healing work and saw just how intertwined some of this stuff is. Today I'm in a very body neutrality place, like a lot of gratitude, a lot of acceptance of like this is what it is. This is my body. But it took me obviously some time, especially as a woman of color. Like you don't really get that luxury. You aren't really given that messaging growing up.
I appreciate that you bring up body neutrality because I think when we're in the midst of hating our bodies, like that doesn't even feel like an option. And then
Mm.
you can be so like into social media that it feels like it's only you hate yourself or you absolutely love every single part of yourself and it's all sunshine and rainbows. And I was like, we can actually just bring it back to the facts of like
Hmm.
your body's not the problem. And like
Yeah.
neutralizing all of the mean and hateful stuff that we can think about ourselves that like you don't have to go from one extreme to the other. We can bring it back to neutrality.
Hmm. Yeah, neutrality, it's so tricky because I think people think that means, well, then I'm accepting it, and then that means I can never change it. And that just kind of exposes their bias to still thinking their body has to change in order for them to be happy or in order for them to feel worthy. And there's a lot of grief wrapped up in that, right? If I just have to accept my body, then that means I might have to give up on a lot of fantasies that I've held. And for the adult children of emotionally mature parents, fantasy was like the number one way that they really coped with their life growing up. So there is a lot of grief wrapped up in it, but I tend to avoid the swings of either full hate, full love, because regardless of how you feel towards it, like here it is, this is it today on, June 2026, this is your body. So we should probably practice some acceptance of your reality.
I love that. And I also love that you brought up the fantasy because I have a question on that. But
Yeah.
first, for those who maybe aren't aware of like your content currently and maybe just haven't dug into how they were raised or the people in their lives, can you explain to us what is an emotionally immature parent and like how do we know if
Hmm.
we have them in our lives,
Hmm.
please?
Great question. So an emotionally mature parent is someone who overly relies on emotionally immature defenses to handle pain, emotional pain. There's a way we can cope with emotional pain, right? Like I might take my anguish and rage and turn that into art. That's a healthier way of dealing with pain. On the more emotionally immature end, you're taking that anguish and rage and you're denying it, or you're distorting it, or you're blaming someone for it, or you're projecting it onto other people. So when you have someone who's more emotionally mature, what's going on inside of them usually spills out onto other people because they don't know what to do with all the stuff going on inside. They don't take responsibility for it. Sometimes they don't even feel like it is theirs. They think something is happening to them when they have these feelings. And you as their child, you're the closest thing in the vicinity, so you often get blamed or you get dumped on in these ways. For a lot of emotionally mature parents, there's a real need to externalize what's going on inside of them. And so they'll take it out on people around them. So if you grew up with an emotionally mature parent, you would likely really resonate with being made into the problem, with having really controlling parents, with having really anxious parents that sought to soothe their anxiety by controlling you, especially controlling what you ate or judging you for what you ate. There's a way that they can't sit with their own stuff. And so it kind of becomes everybody else's problem.
Which leads me into my next definition that I would love from you, please, because how do you define trauma? Because
Hmm.
hearing what you just shared, I'm like, is that classified as trauma? Does it depend on the person? Does it depend on the extent of it?
Yeah, it depends on the person.
Okay.
So, two people can go through the exact same thing, and one might emerge with trauma, the other might not. Like, there's a difference between trauma as a thing, like a car accident, right? That's a thing, versus traumatization, meaning from that thing, I've developed trauma-related symptoms because my body, my psyche, my nervous system at the time could not metabolize, could not make sense of and process what happened in that moment. So I'm left with these overarching these leftover symptoms. And so when you're young and you have a parent who might be really scary, who might really overwhelm you, who might bring a lot of chaos to the home, your developing young nervous system can't handle that. And so as a result, we can develop very real trauma around this and develop symptoms related to like traumatizing symptoms related to these experiences because we did not have the capacity to cope with what was going on in our homes growing up. So it's
Right.
less about like the event. People get really caught
Yeah.
up on like, well, that's not trauma. And frankly, literally nobody can decide that other than the person who went through it and perhaps a trauma expert for them to decide are there trauma related symptoms to this event. That's really how we diagnose trauma in the first place.
Right. And I feel like if for someone that their experience was traumatizing for them, it would be difficult to heal from that while also living with emotionally immature parents who don't have the capacity to actually support you through that trauma.
Hmm. Yeah, that's part of what ends up happening with this wounding is because the people who hurt you then also can't support you through the hurt.
Yeah.
Right? If they oftentimes emotionally immature parents really struggle with taking any type of accountability, struggle with apologizing, struggle with seeing their role in something. So if they hurt you and you muster up the confidence, the gumption to go up to them to say, that really hurt, mom and dad, they have the opportunity, right, to hold you through that, to take it up with themselves, to wonder what their part was in that process in that dynamic. But that would take someone who's quite emotionally mature, not immature. And so if you have that experience, it can really help with trauma, right? Like we know that having someone safe to go through these events with and to make sense of these events actually really helps with trauma. But with this wounding, it's kind of the double-edged sword. Now they not only hurt you, but then they also don't support you through the hurt that they caused.
Yeah. It makes me think about like having siblings and stuff of like they can be one, you can have completely different experiences compared to them with your own same set of parents, but then also how like they can be that safe person while going through that trauma, I feel like.
Like the sibling can be a safe person.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's really common where, like, to be clear, no set of siblings ever have the same parents.
Yeah.
They just don't, right? Like, parents treat their children very differently. And so sometimes you have it where, like, they get pitted against one another, siblings do. Other times you can be one another's safe haven. It really can be helpful, especially if you have a sibling who's older and can provide more of that kind of emotional regulation and caretaking. But nonetheless, it still is quite a heavy burden on both or on all the siblings in the household.
100%. So my first main question is that I was listening to a podcast interview you did with Whitney Goodman.
Hmm.
In it, you mentioned how the fantasy will never be achieved and the goalposts will always keep moving. Do you think growing up with emotionally immature parents makes someone more susceptible to chasing the forever moving goalposts of beauty standards?
Whew. Wow. Yes, is my first answer because I'm actually racking through my mind. Have I ever met somebody or worked with somebody where they weren't on that path? And
Mm,
even if they weren't on that path behaviorally, inside still there was a very deep fantasy, a very deep ideal that they eventually arrive at this place of being good and worthy. But the good and worthy proxy is I'm beautiful, I'm thin, my skin is flawless. People want me because I meet these beauty standards. There's something really insidious around societal beauty standards because there's never you've arrived.
yep.
As soon as you've gotten anywhere, there's the next thing that comes up that you should be doing or you should be trying. And it gives the adult children of emotionally immature parents this real target that they can just keep striving for all the time. And it's like, if I just get to this next thing, then maybe someone will want to date me. Then maybe I'll be lovable. Then maybe so and so will have feelings for me back. It just becomes a bit of a proxy or a vehicle to work out this deep pain around unlovability and like a real lack of worth, a real lack of sense of self.
That makes me wonder how many of your clients who like are constantly chasing this forever moving goalpost, how many of them are like high achievers, like would consider
Hmm.
themselves that way?
It's a good question. I mean, I work in a couple different capacities. I'm thinking also of like the workshops I do and like the bigger group stuff. And I think there's kind of two paths that someone can end up on after this wounding. There's one where you become the overfunctioner, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
you strive for it all, you caretake everybody, you anticipate needs, you're really good at reading the room, you can sense when somebody's mood is off, you know what they might need beforehand, so you go out of your way to meet it even though you're burnt out and resentful. There is a real achieving aspect to that path. Then there's also the person who collapses and like emotionally collapses, psychically collapses, and gets stuck in a bit of a freeze state. And actually, it's not uncommon for one person to kind of um, switch back and forth between these two states. But this other way that it shows up is a lot of like unable to get out of bed, doom scrolling constantly, binge eating as a way to dissociate. A real safety was built around I just won't be seen and I'll just disconnect and I won't feel. So I think it can be both. And both talk about, both experience this deep desire to be seen as beautiful and worthy and to meet these ideals because it is so ingrained no matter, how you experienced what you did experience growing up or no matter how it shows up now. But yeah, I think it can be either way. And both, in my experience, tend to struggle with this idea that if they were just, insert XYZ thing here, everything would be better.
That makes sense. Do you think then it's like if we can recognize that whether it's the acceptance of our parents or a new beauty standard that we've been chasing this post that it keeps moving, do you think part of accepting that is grieving for that then?
It's all grief. It's all grief. Because part of what ends up happening with this wounding is you got the message over and over 100 different times. If you were just better, this wouldn't have happened. If you were just smarter, more kind and considerate, if you just knew my needs better, anticipated my emotions, then none of this would have happened. So that sets the adult children of emotionally mature parents up. I call them ASEPs, by the way. So if you hear me say that acronym, that's what I mean. It sets ASEPs up for the rest of their life to think, oh, I'm just a couple steps away from. If I just work harder, then I'll finally get this thing. So it's like a lifelong path. It's a lifelong way of living. And so if they, come to work with me or they hear me at one of my talks or workshops, and all of a sudden I'm saying, oh yeah, like that might not be the ideal path for you anymore. I think you're actually saying you don't want that anymore. Grief hits like a ton of bricks then because what you're ultimately saying is, oh, all of those ideals I had in my mind, all of those fantasies that everything was eventually going to work out, this whole thing I've been striving for my whole life, that's not going to happen. That's not real. I actually have to accept that this is just my mundane Tuesday life, that this is it. There's a real grief in that. And of course, it's very liberating once you're on the other side of it. But you're initially metabolizing all the hope you held out on, thinking that if I could just get it right, then things would be different.
How, and obviously this question feels like something of like, oh, you should just go work with Morgan. But how do you, like, what would be a first step for navigating that grief?
Hmm. Ooh, the first step for navigating that grief, I mean, you have to look at reality. You have to, for even the grief to hit, you have to be honest about you've been trying this thing for so long and it's not working. You've been trying this thing, you've been running yourself ragged, trying to get to this place, and you've never gotten there. What if we were just really honest that perhaps this isn't going to happen in this way? What if we were really honest that today, June 30th, this is what your life looked like? It's through meeting yourself in your actual reality in that moment, in the here and now, that it starts to hit you, right? That you can come back to your own kind of consciousness a little bit and realize where you're at and be really aware of the way that you've been living out there in the future in the fantasy. And so now here you are, and you have to actually take that in a little bit. And that's really disorienting at first. But it does require like taking tiny bites of reality, meeting yourself here instead of keeping your, heads in the clouds, so to speak.
I really love the parallels though between like having emotionally immature parents and that goalpost moving and the beauty standard goalpost moving, because just hearing what you were just sharing of like how many times are you going to try the same diet 14 times until you can just accept like my body doesn't want this. This isn't working. This doesn't feel good. But then again, you're then grieving everything you thought that diet was going to bring to you.
hmm Yeah, there's another question like I'll often ask people when they come to see me and they're in that state of like, what are you really looking for? If you could snap
Mm.
your fingers right now and give yourself anything, would it actually be a thinner body, or is it everything you think comes with a thinner body? Because that's the direct access to what hurts here, right? That's what we're actually talking about. The body is a proxy, right? The life you think that's going to come, the relationships you think that's going to come, the acceptance, the accolades, whatever it is.
Yeah, but your body has never been the problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's never been the
Mm-hmm.
problem.
Mm-hmm.
How does trying to please one's emotionally immature parents with their body's appearance show up in future romantic relationships?
Oof. So emotionally mature parents tend to take out their aggression and anxiety on their children's bodies. And that can range anything from controlling what you eat to actually being physically violent with you, right? For a lot of ASAPs, especially once they get into their healing journey, they realize their body was territory. It was a site of warfare in a way. Their parent was really carrying out rage and hatred, their own self-hatred onto their children's bodies. And so that motivates you to try and make your body different because you actually think the problem is your body when really it's your parent treating you this way. And then you end up in relationships, romantic relationships. You tend to end up in relationships with people who will see things the same way if you haven't done your own kind of healing work. And you end up repeating that same cycle over and over. We transfer the template that we got from our parents onto our romantic partners. And so we think and anticipate that our partner is also going to find our body disgusting, that our partner would only be with us if we continue to diet or if we, get back to that weight before we had a baby, whatever it was. So it kind of creates this reenactment of all the same stuff over and over if we don't actually turn and face it in the mirror, if we don't actually do that healing work. Because of how scary it was to be in your home growing up and having your body treated that way, like part of that is survival and safety. If you can anticipate that your partner is going to think these things about you and you can get ahead of it, well, then there's your safety plan, right? We also sometimes don't realize that like we aren't eight and helpless anymore. We think, no, this is as dire, this is as lethal. I have to make sure my partner loves my body because I would not be able to survive it. That's a much younger version of you speaking, right? That's a very young part of you. And so if we're not careful, we just repeat the same cycle over and over.
It makes me think about so many things. My brain's like has so many
Sorry,
thoughts
I gave you
going.
like a million things there. Sorry.
No, I am very grateful for it. I know everyone listening right now is very grateful for it. Maybe their brains are also moving a mile a minute because it's like it feels like it comes back to grieving of
hmm
like I think that was the one thought I was trying to find in my brain was it's almost like are you trying to sometimes prove in this new relationship in the romantic relationship of like if I can get them to appreciate me, if I can get them to love me, then it's almost like making up for the fact that your parents didn't when you were younger.
Which is a big reason why we end up in relationships with people who look a lot like our emotionally mature parents if we haven't done our own healing work. Because we think, well, if I just end up with someone who's exactly like my dad or my mom, and I work really hard and actually get them to love me, then it will undo all of this pain I have inside of my own parents not loving me. Like the mission is complete then. And of course,
Mm.
this is all happening on a subconscious level. No one is actually thinking, let me find someone exactly like my abusive dad or my abusive mom, right? But it so happens that we end up kind of drawn to these relationships and feel very motivated to find the same type of person. And there is this real drive. It's a desire to master the event. If I can finally get this person to love me, then I will be healed. Then I'll feel released and freed from these kind of, shackles of my childhood. But it's more of the same. right? And there's a
Mm-hmm.
bit of an impossibility there because you're asking someone to give you something that they really can't give you. If you've chosen someone who's emotionally immature or abusive in some way, and you're still trying and trying and trying, you're asking someone to give you unconditional love when they don't have that template themselves.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like that experience of going from your emotionally mature parent to then that type of relationship, it sounds very valid for the kind of childhood you had growing up. Like it makes complete sense. And so then it's coming back to the awareness right now. Like you don't, that's not going to change how your parents were growing up. That's not going to properly heal what is like asking to be healed and like properly seen inside of you. What advice would you give for the adult children of emotionally immature parents who are still chasing then their parents' approval via even maybe their relationships, but how they eat, how they look, how they dress?
Hmm. Oh, so many different things. I mean, the first thing I tend to teach people to do is to see their parents as people because when we're young, we have to see our parents as godlike. That's really important. And it's part of like the childhood development to see your parent as godlike. We're new and scared on this weird floating rock. And I need to know that someone is going to have my back and that person is godlike, right? But if
Mm-hmm.
you don't get the actual separating process, the emotional separating process, when as you grow up and you stay enmeshed with your parent, then you can still think, oh, like they do know what's right. They do know what's right and wrong. They have the right way of viewing the world. They have the right way of how I'm supposed to be eating, how I'm supposed to be living my life. And you don't realize it, but you keep them in this godlike position. So I tend to ask people to start to develop their own opinions around food and diet culture and what they actually want for themselves. And at first, they really don't know. They really like there's a blank stare, well, this is my opinion. And when we walk it back a little bit, we actually see like this has been a template that's been handed to them. This has been information and a way of seeing things that was kind of forced upon them, not actually because they want to see things this way. So we really slow things down and start to get in touch with their own opinions and their own thoughts on certain things and see if that actually measures up to how they're living their life. And nine times out of 10, it's the way they've been living their life is much more strict and harsh and painful and rigid than what they do actually want for themselves. So it
Mm-hmm.
really is a matter of getting in touch with your own sense of what you want, your, best friend or to the person or the child you love the most. Would you want to hand them the same template around food and body image? Would you want them to think these things, your niece, your nephew, right? Your daughter, your son, do you want them to have the same blueprint? Because by the way, they're learning through you, like they're watching you more than what you say to them. They are watching what you are doing with food yourself, and you're modeling that to them. And so if you wouldn't want it for anybody that you love, why would you want it for yourself? So yeah, it's really developing your own mind around food and diet and body image.
What just came up for me with what you were sharing is thinking about my niece and back when I was heavy into dieting. How what I thought I was sharing, I thought I was sharing good stuff. I thought I was being
Mm,
helpful. I thought I was giving off such a great example for the younger humans in my life. And now that I'm out of that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm
hmm
so sorry. What do I do now? And like trying to lead by example in a new way.
hmm
But I don't know, I think there's so many scenarios of like when we're trying to please our parents and when we're trying to do new diets and change how we look that like we truly believe or like we've convinced ourselves and the thoughts and beliefs we have in our mind have convinced ourselves that like we're doing the right thing.
Yes. There's a very real, like puritanical and morality wrapped up in food and diet, right? There's a superiority. If I eat a certain way, then I'm healthier or healthy, and thus I am better. Like if we
Mhm.
really boil it down, there's a deep, deep morality and superiority. And even if you wanted to continue to believe that, you could, right? Like that, it's your prerogative to continue in a certain set of beliefs. Even if you believe you are right, that doesn't mean you should. It doesn't mean it's healthy for you to kind of oppress those opinions on other people, right? I can have my own opinions and I can believe these things and they make sense for me, but I then don't have to go around door to door knocking, convincing everyone that their way is the wrong way, right? And I think there is something we were really sold, right, growing up of like, this is the right way to do things, and you're a better person if you do this, and how could you be so weak and undisciplined? And so there, I think at the core there really is um, an ex a good intention behind some of this, like a desire for people to be healthy, whatever it might be. And yet, we have to actually acknowledge that people are their own selves. It's not on us to make somebody different, right? It's not on us for somebody to get somebody to think the same way that we do. Oof. So emotionally mature parents tend to take out their aggression and anxiety on their children's bodies. And that can range anything from controlling what you eat to actually being physically violent with you, right? For a lot of ASAPs, especially once they get into their healing journey, they realize their body was territory. It was a site of warfare in a way. Their parent was really carrying out rage and hatred, their own self-hatred onto their children's bodies. And so that motivates you to try and make your body different because you actually think the problem is your body when really it's your parent treating you this way. And then you end up in relationships, romantic relationships. You tend to end up in relationships with people who will see things the same way if you haven't done your own kind of healing work. And you end up repeating that same cycle over and over. We transfer the template that we got from our parents onto our romantic partners. And so we think and anticipate that our partner is also going to find our body disgusting, that our partner would only be with us if we continue to diet or if we, get back to that weight before we had a baby, whatever it was. So it kind of creates this reenactment of all the same stuff over and over if we don't actually turn and face it in the mirror, if we don't actually do that healing work. Because of how scary it was to be in your home growing up and having your body treated that way, like part of that is survival and safety. If you can anticipate that your partner is going to think these things about you and you can get ahead of it, well, then there's your safety plan, right? We also sometimes don't realize that like we aren't eight and helpless anymore. We think, no, this is as dire, this is as lethal. I have to make sure my partner loves my body because I would not be able to survive it. That's a much younger version of you speaking, right? That's a very young part of you. And so if we're not careful, we just repeat the same cycle over and over.
That almost feels like a symptom, though, of having emotionally immature parents.
It is a symptom of having emotionally mature
Okay.
parents. The emotionally mature relationship system thrives on enmeshment. They cannot, emotionally immature parents, because they don't have the internal capacity to regulate their own emotions, they keep you close as an extension. They don't see you or acknowledge you as your own separate sense of self. Your nervous systems can become just very fused, very kind of linked together. And they expect you, especially if you have an emotionally mature parent who's a little more narcissistic, they expect you to think the same way that they think, to view the world that they do, to want what they want. And there's a real process that makes it possible for you to do that. It makes it possible for them to continue to kind of use you as this extension. So, when so much of this work is actually what we call differentiating, seeing yourself as a completely separate person with your own opinions and mind and desires and goals. And that can feel really threatening when your whole life you've been trained to see things one way, live your life one way, have a very specific set of goals. And if you don't do that, then you're bad and the family's going to oust you. And how could you do that to Uncle Steve or whatever it was? There's a real betrayal and a guilt process that happens by becoming your own person. And so it does feel, um, what's the word? It does feel lofty or weird to hear someone say, no, actually, you have to be separate and let people be their own person. That doesn't make a lot of sense to both ASAPs and emotionally mature parents because that's not the template they've been handed. The template they've been handed is you need to think the same. You need to be the same. You need to achieve what your parents want for you. You are not separate. You are them. You are an extension of everything they've ever wanted. So it does take a lot of mental shifting towards, right, I'm my own person and my neighbor is their own person and this person across the street is their own person. It's kind of foreign at first, but it absolutely is a response, a reaction to growing up in emotionally mature families.
So many of us continue to struggle with our body image due to cycles of shame that we find ourselves in. First, how does someone know if they're stuck in a shame spiral? Which it feels like everything we've been chatting about will lead to that shame spiral, especially when we're trying to get out of those thoughts of like we can be our own person. So, how do we know if we're stuck in a shame spiral? And what would be a good first step to reduce the shame?
So a shame spiral or really seeing yourself or your body from this place of shame usually involves a lot of hiding. And at the core, like dieting and like trying to be on this track to lose weight, like that there's a hiding element to that. Like don't see me for who I really am, don't see my body for what it really is. I need to change it first. A lot of people who struggle with shame in this way, especially when it comes to their body, they make a lot of goals about what they'll do once they lose 20 pounds or what they'll do once they, have nicer biceps or whatever it is. And so if you find yourself hiding and if you find yourself feeling incredibly embarrassed about people seeing your body, usually that's when we start to ask questions around shame and this kind of deep, insidious experience and embarrassment of just you being seen and you being out in the world, whether that's like seen on a date or seen in a friends group or just seen at the movie theater. As much as you are hiding, like that's where we start to question shame. If you are looking to get out of shame, I mean, that's a lofty process that really does. I know I keep coming back to this, but it really does start with emancipating your mind. Because usually the shame that you carry is a result of so many different messages from so many different people and systems that you haven't paused to ask yourself if I actually believe these things, right? Do I actually believe it is better? You're a morally better human being than me because you are 20 pounds lighter or because you're 100 pounds lighter? Is that a value I actually hold for myself? Right? Yes, the world might think that, and Big Pharma might think that, and whoever, right? Your parents might think that, but what do you think? It can be really scary at first to have your own thoughts. And so when someone's really in that state, I'll really coach them or help them to try to find other like-minded people. And sometimes that's support groups, sometimes that's online group programs, even just another world where they can be exposed to different people who think differently, right? Because in many ways, you do get to choose a reality that you want to live your everyday in. And it takes a ton of time to emancipate yourself from your current reality. But there are people out there who think completely different from you, who are not in danger of doing anything wrong for thinking different than you. And you might actually really enjoy spending a ton of time with this person, right? Or these people in these communities. And so be asking yourself, like, are these actually my ideals? Do I actually value these things? Or was this handed to me? And as you're trying to work yourself kind of out of that shame, it's just so important to find other people who see things the same way that you do, to know it's not so dangerous to not show up for the ideal. I think that's the thing that gets people really stuck is like, no, bad things are going to happen for me if I don't continue on this train. I'm never going to be wanted or lovable or whatever it is. And especially if you had emotionally mature parents who might have been more on the sadistic end where they were actually like physically harmful, you can really still walk the world feeling like something bad is going to happen to me. And that's where we want to update that template, find communities and people who do see it differently, find moments of safety with people who do see it differently, and let yourself settle into that moment.
It's like for social media, there's a side that's just not fun. And then there are so many accounts on social media, though, that are amazing and can help with the shame that we feel and to see things so differently. It's like the accounts that I used to follow when I was in my dieting days. I don't follow those accounts anymore. I found a different side of social media and it's so nice. One of the things that I have seen on social media in terms of shame is distinguishing it between guilt. Of like, I've seen it said that guilt is like, oh, I did something bad. And then shame is saying, I am bad. And it's like, you're
Yeah.
not bad because of how your body looks. You're not bad for disagreeing with your parents. And I think for like all of it, it sounds like it's coming back to like, you are safe. You are not in
Mm-hmm.
that home. You are safe to look how you look. You are safe to stand up for yourself. You're safe to set those boundaries. It's probably not going to feel like it right now. It's probably going
Yeah.
to feel real freaking scary. But then when you like expose yourself to these other pages on social media and to these other groups and these other friends, that's when you can see it's like they did it and they survived. They did
Mm-hmm.
it and their parent actually reacted okay. Like what?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a
Yeah,
different
I
reality.
completely different reality that we don't even know exists because we're still so stuck in our own and we're still so committed to seeing things that same way that our parents might have seen things. But it's interesting because, when people come in and come to see me and they're still following certain accounts and they're even saying, it really hurts to keep like living this way. But then they swipe and they swipe and they swipe and it's just all the same stuff. You have to kind of ask yourself, I mean, humans are ambivalent, right? We're always breaking the gas at the same time. We're not always 100% like 2 feet into one side. So I get it. And also, what is the payoff that you get by still being so attached to certain communities, to certain ways of thinking? Like, how is this serving you? Because there's a way, like, if it didn't have a function, you wouldn't be doing it. So is
Mm-hmm.
it hope? Is it self-harm? Like, what is it that is keeping you so tethered to something that actually seems to hurt you more than it does you any good? It's also interesting because people who finally take that plunge and unfollow and kind of give up on diet culture and really start to develop their own mind around some of this stuff, they absolutely go through it emotionally. But what I find is they're often like, that actually wasn't that bad. Like I was waiting for like the sky to fall. I was waiting for like this big scary thing, and they're like, "Oh, it's just this."
Yep.
Like I actually just stop hating myself, right? Like,
What?
yeah, like they're waiting for, this huge thing, but it's like, "Oh no, I just yeah, I like actually just stopped hating myself and like I ate differently." I got in touch with my own hunger cues. I yeah, it maybe ate more diverse. I went to made connections with people who saw the world the same way that I did, but the sky didn't fall. And usually what ends up happening is there's this relief around how quote unquote kind of easy and not scary it was. And maybe I won't say easy, but not as scary as they thought it would. And what we actually see is that holding on to, oh my God, something bad is going to happen. What they originally thought it was going to be is a bit of an emotional flashback. And they're holding on to something from childhood
Mm.
where it really was that bad. And they haven't processed a particular memory. They haven't processed a particular experience where it was painful, but it got attached to having their own mind, to body image. And so, yeah, it's really interesting the way that our history is informing a lot of what we're doing today when it comes to food, but it's usually not as scary as people think it is going to be.
Yeah. I did a certification program, and one of the things that they talked about was how so many of us continue to live in our parents' emotional homes even after we've long moved out. And so it's like so many of these decisions that we keep making for ourselves and these thoughts that we keep believing is because we're still living in their homes. It's like it's time to move out.
Hmm.
Time
Yeah.
to live in your own
Yeah.
emotional
Evict
home.
yourself from your parents' home. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's the thing too that can really drive people crazy. Like they are still living there, but they also realize their parents have kind of moved on. Like they're still trying to please their parents, they're still trying to be that child, and they'll never get it right because their parent needs it to be so that they'll never get it right. The whole setup is so the child is just always trying to earn approval.
Mm.
But even when the child does do something right, even when the adult child loses the weight or gets the job, it still is never enough. And so it's like you actually might be the only one still living there, right? They
That's
are
such a
not
great
actually,
point.
yeah, they're not actually sitting at the table after school waiting for you to meet this goal weight. They might still get upset or become dysregulated or judge you in these ways today, but you are still very gung-ho going for something and you might be living alone in that emotional home. They might not be there anymore.
Dang, that's a really that's a really good way of looking at it. You made a post on Instagram recently that really resonated for me. It was arguing that people say your parents did the best they could
Mm.
after you share something that hurt you. First, what happens when someone says this?
Mm. Well, when someone says my parents hurt me, or when someone says they did the best they could.
That they did the best they could.
Yeah, so usually that person, if they're moving into, no, your parents did the best they could, it's because they believe that same thing around their own childhood wounding, and it is too threatening for them to hop into your world and maybe imagine holding their parents as equally responsible or naming their parents as the thing that hurt them. We hold on to our stories very tightly if they are the thing that kind of keeps us stitched up and able to function in the world. And so when you meet somebody who threatens that, you'll do everything in your power to get them to change their story. Because again, I need you to think like I think. I need you to see things the same way that I do so that I feel safe. So
Mm-hmm.
never have I ever seen it where someone says, no, they did the best they could. And they actually meant well for the ASEP and they actually believed that for like what the EIP might have been or the emotionally mature parent might have been actually going through. Instead, it's much more about, no, please don't threaten the way I've come to make sense of my own childhood pain. Please don't. I need you to see it the same way I do. It's too much, please. Like you're threatening me, you're scaring me.
Mm-hmm. It makes me think about like so many of the women that I talk to, like their parents put them on diets when they were young, like
Hmm.
in their adolescence. And then they might bring that up nowadays, and someone's going to say, well, your parents did the best they could. I'm like, is that the best they could have done? And like, when is that about them being emotionally mature?
Hmm.
And just like, it diminishes our experience. right?
Hmm.
And then it's like, how does the adult child, like, how can they move forward after someone has gone and said, oh, well, your parents did the best they could?
Like imagine if you just got your foot run over by somebody and
Hmm.
you run up to someone on the street and you're like, my foot is broken. I just got my foot run over. Please help me. My foot is broken. And the person looks at you and goes, the driver, they
Ugh.
really did the best they could. Like, are you kidding? Why are we talking about the driver right now? It makes no sense. So
I
this is
love that.
again, like this is not about all of a sudden it's no longer about the ASAP. All of a sudden it's about the parent and the parent caused harm, whether or not the parent intentionally did it, whether or not they did the best they could or they didn't. Someone is bleeding out in front of you. Somebody has a broken foot in front of you, and you're attempting to bandage it up with, well, they did the best they could. That doesn't actually stop the bleed. That doesn't actually cast up the broken foot. So if you feel yourself having that urge, it's important to take that up with yourself around why do I need this person to believe this story so much? Like what is it about me that I need that?
Instead of saying, well, your parents did the best they could, what could someone say instead?
Well, depending on your level of like closeness with this person, if you're close and you care about them, tell me more. Tell me more. That sounds really hard. I hate that for you. Oh my God. Wow. You sound sad. Like just meet them in the moment. Care. Take interest. But it's hard for us to do that because we often feel like it's so threatening to our own self that we're like, no, please put that back together. We can't go there. But if you can hold on to your own sense of self and let the other person have their own experience too, then just be wildly curious. Ask questions, care, like take an interest. That's the easiest route, right? And you might notice because this person could be an ASAP, you might notice that they're also recruiting you to try and heal it for them. Sometimes we see this with romantic partners of like, my parents did this to me, so you can never be like this, right? We want to stop that sentence as at my parent did this to me. And then a partner can come in and say, tell me more. That sounds like it hurts. I'm here, I'm listening. But when the sentence is, my parents did this to me, and thus you need to never be this way, or you need to XYZ, then it gets a little more tricky. So, as the ASAP, share about your experience. And as the listener, take interest in the experience, right? Hold your own sense of self tightly and let the other person have theirs.
Tell me more is such like a powerful sentence. That's so good. And I think it also applies to literally everything we've been chatting about. Of like when it comes to the shame, tell me more. When it
Mm-hmm.
comes to the what you think losing weight or pleasing your parents is going to bring you, tell me more. And like you can have that conversation with yourself too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of like if you are admitting to yourself of tough things that you've been through, you can ask yourself, can we expand on that just a little bit more and dig just a little
Mm-hmm.
bit deeper and see like what's actually coming up for us? But just like being able to say that to someone else of like tell me more, and it's such a simple thing to remember, to have locked and loaded in your brain and ready,
Mm-hmm.
and you can make that become the habit rather than the habit of saying, well, your parents did the best they could, or any other
Yes.
invalidating comment.
Totally. Yeah. Like if your friend is bringing you something or someone you know is bringing you something and you want to demonstrate you care, you need to stay with that person in front of you. Like stay with what they're bringing you, not flipping on to something else or going on to a different topic. Tell me more is a really powerful way to say like I'm listening and also like I'm really curious that your inner world it matters to me. And that's all of what we're asking for, especially as ASAPs, we don't get that messaging that our inner world really matters to anybody. No one really asks us questions growing up. Even today, I know people really who really struggle with their emotionally mature parents still, like their parents will not ask them a single question, don't even know what to ask them because they don't know their children. And so there's like a real love that happens when someone asks you a very meaningful, intimate question. Like, what's going on in your mind? Where are you? Tell me about what's going on in there. Like, that's the most kind of profound way to be seen. That's
Hmm.
really what ASAPs are asking for.
I have one small example from this of I had a friend ask me like, "Oh, how's it going?" And I decided to say, "Oh, I've just been really tired." And then he actually asked, "Oh, what's been making you tired?" I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
"You weren't going to say like, "Oh, I'm really tired too, and this is why I'm tired." He
Mm-hmm.
actually asked like, "Oh, what's been making you tired?" I'm like, "Okay, I can actually share why I'm tired with you right now." And that was
Mm-hmm.
actually it just I don't feel like that's ever really happened to me when someone has asked, how are you doing, to then expand on like, well, what's making you sad? What's making you tired? I'm like, the way you feel seen in that, I'm like,
Hmm.
it feels very good compared to just like moving on and like coming up with fake answers that when people ask you of like, how are
Hmm.
you feeling? So like, tell me more is very powerful.
It can feel good and it can also feel scary, right? Because there's a
Yeah.
way that you've moved through your whole life being somewhat defended of like, no, no, I'll just be the caretaker. I'll be, the parentified child who like knows everybody's needs and pays attention to everybody else. So as much as you're craving for somebody to like say things like that to you, it can also, you might take it in and that might feel good. And then you might say, well, this is why I'm tired. Anyway, how are you? Right? You're putting it back onto the other person
Mm-hmm.
because of the threat itself, the threat of being seen, the threat of being known. To be seen and to be known in the emotionally mature family system sometimes was a very humiliating experience. A lot of EIPs would humiliate their children for their interests, for their different opinions. And so it can become much safer to just stay buttoned up. So it's a bit of a push-pull, wanting to be known, but also being terrified of being known.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the second part to that other question is, what are some indicators to know that someone actually was trying their best?
Hmm. Someone as in the parent.
Yeah, I think so. And for this question, yes.
I'm noticing my own resistance to this question for
Okay.
two reasons. I'll tell you, and then I'll tell you my actual answer. The first is that when we want to know if someone was doing their best, it's because we're trying to figure out if you were worth doing your best for, right? Like if even if my
Oh.
parent made mistakes, but they were trying their best, then I can still sleep at night because someone cared enough to try their best, right? Which can override your own pain. It can still shut you off from, well, what are you actually feeling though? Even though they tried their best, there's still real harm and real hurt in there. So let's hold that next to what's actually going on inside. Where is the wounding? Tell me what hurts. And so I want to just plant that seed because it can be a slippery slope as a way to bypass what actually hurts, right? We can arrive back on, no, no, they did try their best. So that's the first thing. The piece around like how do we actually know? I mean, this is an interesting question, but I would think of it this way. Was there like real limitations and capacities or incapacity, I should say, that prevented them from being able to meet you where you needed to be met that were outside of your control? Right? So sometimes we're dealing with parents who might have brain injuries. We're dealing with parents who might have real like structural things that hold them back from being able to do more. And
Mm-hmm.
so if they're operating at their best with the limited capacity they have, then that might be something that you can take up with yourself around deciding if that was their best. Of course, parents are often going to say they were doing their best, right? But that still does not actually get at your own wounding. That still does not actually say anything about the ASAP. So sometimes there are actual limitations, sometimes there are actual structural stuff that gets in the way. And I think too, when I see parents who were genuinely trying their best but kept missing the mark, they still sought a lot of support and outside opinion. Like they were willing, they were trying, they kind of clumsily made mistakes, right? Like they had a real emotional immaturity about them, but they were trying really hard. The ASAP might have said something to the parent, and the parent was like gritting their teeth, sitting with it, trying to not blame the child, trying to not put it back on the child. Maybe the parent sought outside supports like school supports or like mental health supports. Maybe they brought in other family, right, in a way there's a way like when we're saying did they do their best, I mean what we're kind of asking is did they self-reflect, did they take things up with themselves, did they go the extra mile, did they try again, did they get it wrong even though they were trying again, right? There is a particular emotionally mature parent who I compare them to like a bull in a china shop, but like the bull is a cartoon and the face is like the sad, scared face of like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. And then they turn swiftly and then they like knock everything off the cabinet and they're like, oh no, I'm so sorry. And then they turn again to back it up and then they've, broken something behind them. They're trying, but they really keep fumbling. And that's a parent who, like, you can genuinely tell there's like a motivation to do things differently, an attempt to repair. They're reading things, they're learning things, they're trying and yet keep kind of making mistakes versus parents who are really gridlocked in, no, you are the bad one. I'm not interested in taking this up with myself. You are the problem. You need to change for me to be okay. I am in control here. You are not. That really kind of superior, more oppressive type of parent. I argue that they weren't doing their best, and none of us are doing our best 100% of the time. That's the thing. It's not really an indictment. It's kind of just reality. That's the other reason why that quote is so frustrating because, when someone says, well, they did their best. No, like human, that's not the human condition. We're not always doing our best. We always probably could have strived a little bit harder. And so it just doesn't even make sense, reality speaking. Why are we not only talking about the parent, but why are we also like making up some empty platitude that actually isn't factual about the human condition? Anyway, I
Mm-hmm.
could go on about this for hours.
Oh no, I love it. Thank you. Because yeah, I think it is one of those comments that is so common to hear of like, oh, they did their best, or then even ourselves saying, oh, I'm doing my best. I'm doing the best I can. And I feel like there can just be so much pressure on everyone in general for that comment, but it really the idea that trying to figure out whether or not someone did their best could be trying to bring it back to was I worth someone doing
Mm,
their best for?
hmm.
Mind
Yeah.
blown. That's
Yeah.
I'm gonna be
That's
thinking
usually what
about that
people are
all day.
asking. They're usually like, okay, but did you try? Like, even if you couldn't, but like, did you try? Because if you did, then I can still know and sleep at night, like knowing I was worth you trying your best for. Then I'm still good and lovable and worthy. Meanwhile, they have so many trauma symptoms. They're so hurt. They're repeating dynamics in their relationship. It's I get it, like I so strongly get it. And also I think the reason why that statement gets to me and that conceptualization gets to me is because I learned nothing about the ASEP in that moment. I'm still learning about the EIP. And the emotionally mature parent has had so much airtime. The ASEP's whole life has been about the emotionally mature parent. And I'm trying to learn about whomever. And it's still once again the mind is going back to but my parent. And it's all a reaction to this kind of brainwashing that happens inside of these homes. But it's another way we bypass ourselves. And your healing requires you to retether back to your own sense of self. It requires you to know the bounds of you and to do your own. And this is an inside job, right? Whether or not your parents tried their best or not, here you are, hurt, wounded. We got to go there. We got to talk about you.
Time to grieve.
Time to grieve. Yes.
So, my last main question for you is how do we prevent ourselves from becoming emotionally immature?
Mm, love this. Therapy, coaching. I have to do a little plug for that because
Of course.
we live in a very, very fast-paced, overworked, traumatizing world. And emotional maturity is really the ability to stretch your threshold to sit in discomfort without turning it into somebody else's problem or without it fully turning an attack on yourself. It's can I tolerate this capacity to sit in this painful place? And humans can do that only through connection. We can't really do that alone in isolation. So when I say therapy or coaching, it's because we're talking about the relational experience of really being met by somebody. And that is what stretches someone's emotional maturity. That's how they learn, especially in the safest of environments in a safe relationship. I can mess up here. Things can be scary. I can get it wrong. I can say the shameful, ugly thing, and I'm still okay. And so if I can do that here in therapy, then I can do that out in the world. I don't have to take things out on other people. I don't have to take things out on my kids. It's okay for me to take things up with myself and wonder what happened there because I'm allowed to make mistakes, just like I was shown in therapy or in coaching. It's a big reason why my mentorship is a group environment because there's something very powerful about being in the room with 20 other people and all of you seeing for the first time, we can all make mistakes and everybody in the room stays. Morgan is still my coach. So and so across the room still cares about me. Like we are all still here. And that's the corrective experience that ASEPs needed all along was that they could get it wrong, they could not be perfect, and their parents would still equally love them. And that's conditionally, that's not what they got, right? They got a real conditional love. So increasing your emotional maturity, it's so much about your relationships, your safest relationships, and your ability to tolerate discomfort.
The group program sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I'm curious, do you think that there's any, or I guess what would be the different perks to for someone who is an adult child of emotionally immature parents to do something solo with a therapist versus a
Hmm.
group program?
Ooh, good question. So, I'll say most people who come into my mentorship have already done individual therapy.
Okay.
So, through individual therapy or individual coaching, they've kind of developed this floor beneath them. Like things are a little more sturdy, right? And that way you can kind of tolerate when you're in a group environment, someone saying something triggering and still staying and getting clarification, right? There's a lot of dynamics that unfold in a group environment, especially, coaching is a little different because we don't go backwards, we go forwards. So there's friction and tension that comes up, but through doing individual work first, you tend to really be able to stand on your own. I think too, if you know this about yourself, that your emotional maturity is not where you want it to be, you might find a group dynamic a little overwhelming, right?
Mm.
If Susie has different political opinions, right? And of course, we don't get political in the group too much, but if Susie has political opinions that are different from yours, or sees the world differently, or had a conflict with their partner the night before and came and is sharing about it, and you actually sided with the partner, right? Or you've gone through the same conflict and you've been on the receiving end of, what Susie did to their partner, then it just brings up a lot of stuff. And so if you know this about yourself, that you're not able to really sit in that dynamic just yet, then individual is probably the place for you to go. But I will say for ASAPs, you do want to find someone, if you're working with a coach or a therapist, you want to find someone who's really relational rather than your kind of standard worksheet therapist or coach who might be like, challenge that thought, or here's a boundary. This wounding is so primal. It's so existential. It's so, do I exist? Do I matter? Does somebody think about me? Why did these things happen to me? There's like justice fantasies and ruminations, right? It's a worksheet's really not going to tap into that. So it really is about where you're at in that moment and what you think you can tolerate.
Right. So the searching for a therapist or coach who's more relational is like someone who's just more in conversation with you rather than giving you
So
like
there's different modalities to
okay.
the work. Some people are very cognitive and they believe I'm therapist, your client, you're over there, I'm here, and you go do your homework and I'll grade it and we'll talk and that's that. Relational therapies see things like we're co-creating this relationship together, and actually the relationship that you and I create is going to be the healing instrument above all. I could give you a worksheet, but that's not really going to scratch the surface. Instead, it's going to be me actually really hearing your story and feeling your emotions with you and being a witness to a lot of your pain, and us building that trust and building that I don't like saying safe space, but corrective space where you can say these things and I still stay. That's
Mm.
what updates the blueprint for the body, right? When you're able to go to someone and say the most crazy things in your mind, and that person stays and actually has the reaction that you've been waiting for, that's the corrective experience. And so it really depends on the modality that that therapist or coach might practice. Coaching, of course, is a little different. You can definitely do relational coaching, but again, you're not really going too far into the past. But yeah, there's certain modalities that are much more about no, no, the tool of healing here is you and I, right? And so,
Mm.
for example, something that will often happen in relational therapy is like I'll get it wrong. I'll make my reflection might be off, or maybe I forgot something. And the most healing experience is that ASAP finally feeling safe enough to say, no, Morgan, you got it wrong. That's not right. And me being able to say, you're right. I got it really wrong. And we repair and we move forward together. And that's the healing work, right? Is they can tell someone they got it wrong and someone stays and that person owns what they got wrong. That's much more important than a worksheet. No, no shade to worksheet therapists, y'all have your place, but you know what I mean? It's a relational wound, so it needs a relational intervention.
Mm, yeah, thank you for that clarification. And thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here on the podcast with us. To close, I have two questions that I ask all of my guests. The first one is what do you wish you could go back and tell younger Morgan?
Oh my God, so many things. Like get off the Special K diet. You're
Oh,
starving
yes.
for a reason, and this cereal is disgusting. No offense to Special K is a sponsor of this podcast, but like, what are you doing? Get off that. Yeah, that's the number one thing.
Love it. The second question is, what advice would you give to someone who is just starting out trying to learn to love their body more?
Don't learn to love your body more. Don't make that your goal. Don't even try to learn to love your body. Just get to know it. Just accept
Ooh.
that today is your body. These are your toes. These are your legs. This is your nose. Here's your tummy. You don't have to love it. You don't have to even like it. This is just it. So lower your standards, lower your expectations that you're going to love this thing that's too lofty of a goal. I don't even know if I believe in that. I've never actually ascribed to even this idea of self-love. Doesn't make sense to me. Self-knowing makes sense to me. So yeah, lower your expectations. You don't have to love it.
Just get to know it. Mic drop. That's so because so many of us like we're disassociating all day long with our eating behaviors, whatever it may be. And it's like we don't know our body, we don't know ourselves, we don't know our own opinions.
Hmm.
Just get
Yeah,
to know
it's
it. What
much
a
safer for so many survivors and ASAPs to live in their head, right? I don't have to feel
yes.
things if I just live in my head and I just analyze everything. So then when I drop down into my body, oh my God, what is this? Where do I even, where's my legs? Like, how do I even end? Are they really this big? Like, there's a lot of disorientation because you just have not been in touch with your body at all.
That's thank you for sharing that. This is very great advice.
You're so
And
welcome. Thank you
again,
for having me.
of course, would you like to share where is the best place for listeners to find you on social media or for working with you?
Yeah, they can come to Morgan Pommells on Instagram. My last name is Pommells. And that's it for right now. If you want to, if you're interested in joining my mentorship, you can sign up for the wait list. It doesn't open again until 2027. There's once a year cohort, application based. As you can imagine, it sells out quite quickly. But yeah, come hang out with me on Instagram.
Awesome. I will also link it in the show notes. But again, thank you so much for being here. I'm honestly I'm personally excited to re-listen to this multiple times. So, thank you.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of course, and remember that your body is not the problem.